At my wedding, my brother gave a toast. Hard to believe he finally tricked someone into saying yes. Everyone laughed. My wife looked at me in shock. I just smiled. 2 years later, I made a decision that made them regret that night forever. You know those moments that stay frozen in your memory? Like someone took a screenshot of your life and it just sits there, never fading. Mine happened 2 years ago at my own damn wedding. The moment my brother Theodore grabbed that microphone, I should have known something was coming. I just didn't realize it would be the last straw. Let me backtrack a bit so you guys understand why this hit so hard. Growing up with Theodore was like constantly living in a shadow. He was 4 years older, supposedly smarter, supposedly more successful, and definitely my parents' favorite. Every family dinner was Theodore this and Theodore that. When I got A's, they'd nod. When he got A's, it was like they'd witnessed a miracle. Typical golden child bullshit. Throughout our childhood, Theodore had this special way of putting me down that always came off as just joking to everyone else. He'd wait until we had an audience. Then he'd drop some comment about how I couldn't get a date, or how I'd never amount to much, or how he was surprised I managed to graduate. And everyone would laugh, including my parents. Especially my parents. I worked my ass off after high school, built a life for myself, learned skills, made something of myself without my family's help or connections. Theodore went to a fancy college on my parents' dime, came back with his head even bigger, and somehow convinced everyone he was God's gift to our hometown. Then I met Eloise. She is, everything, smart as hell, takes no shit, and for some reason saw something in me that even I didn't see. When I brought her home to meet the family, Theodore did his usual routine, kept telling stories about how I wet the bed until I was 10, I didn't, and how I once got rejected by every girl in my class for prom. Also didn't happen. Eloise saw right through him. Later that night, she told me Theodore was deeply insecure, and that's why he needed to put me down. First time anyone had ever taken my side against him. When I proposed to Eloise a year later, Theodore actually laughed, asked me if I'd had to beg. My mom chimed in, wondering if we were rushing things. My dad just looked uncomfortable, like always. But Eloise said yes, and suddenly nothing else mattered. We planned a small wedding, nothing fancy, just close friends and family at a local venue. Theodore and my parents kept pushing for something bigger. Something worthy of the family name. Whatever TF that means, Eloise and I stood our ground. It was our day, not theirs. The wedding was beautiful, simple, perfect. Until the speeches. My best friend Blake went first, said some nice stuff, kept it short. Then Theodore grabbed the mic. He started with some generic BS about brotherhood and growing up together. Then his tone shifted. I saw that look in his eyes. The same look he'd get right before humiliating me as kids. He launched into a story about how I'd always been unlucky with the ladies. Not true. How I'd been desperate to find someone. Also not true. Then came the lifeline that's burned into my brain forever. Hard to believe Marcus finally tricked someone into saying yes. The room erupted in laughter. My parents were practically crying, they were laughing so hard. Theodore's wife, Robin, was snickering into her champagne. Even some of my cousins, who I thought had my back, were chuckling. I looked at Eloise. She wasn't laughing. Her face had gone completely still, eyes wide with shock. She looked from Theodore to my laughing parents, then back to me. I could see the question in her eyes. Are you going to say something? But I didn't. I just smiled, raised my glass like it was the funniest thing I'd ever heard. Inside, something snapped. Completely fucking snapped. The rest of the night is a blur. We danced, we cut cake, we smiled for photos. I shook hands and thanked people for coming. I played the part of the happy groom. But inside, all I could hear was the laughter. All I could see was Theodore's smug face. All I could feel was this white-hot rage building with nowhere to go. Back in our hotel room, Eloise finally asked if I was okay. That's when I lost it. Not at her, never at her, but everything came pouring out. Years of Theodore's bullshit, years of my parents picking sides, years of swallowing my pride and playing along. I'm not ashamed to admit I broke down, full-on ugly crying, while my wife of 8 hours held me. Eloise said something that night I'll never forget. She said, "They showed you who they really are tonight. Believe them." I did. I fucking believed them. The next morning I made a decision. No more playing the good little brother. No more letting things slide. No more smiling while Theodore stepped all over me. I wasn't sure yet how, but someday I would make him pay for every single humiliation, for every laugh at my expense, especially for ruining what should have been the happiest day of my life. We skipped the post-wedding brunch my parents had planned, went straight to our honeymoon instead. I ignored the texts from my family asking where we were, ignored my mom's passive-aggressive message about how we'd embarrassed them by not showing up. For 2 weeks, Eloise and I pretended my family didn't exist. When we got back, things went back to normal. I'd see my family at Sunday dinners sometimes. Theodore would make his usual comments. I'd smile and take it. But something had changed inside me. Each dig, each joke, each backhanded compliment wasn't just annoying anymore. It was ammunition. I started paying closer attention. I noticed things. How Theodore would brag about his business deals, but change the subject when anyone asked for detail. How he'd mysteriously cancel plans when it was his turn to pay for dinner. How he'd wear flashy watches, but drive the same car for years. Little inconsistencies that made me wonder. For the next 2 years, I played the role of the same old Marcus, the pushover, the little brother who could take a joke. But I was watching, learning, waiting. Then I heard through the grapevine that Theodore was looking for investors for his latest project, something big that would put him on the map, according to my mom. When he casually brought it up at a family dinner, trying to sound like he was doing potential investors a favor by letting them in on this sure thing, I saw my opening. The same night as that dinner, exactly 2 years after my wedding, I started making calls. Turns out, little brothers, who nobody takes seriously, can learn all kinds of interesting things when nobody thinks they're paying attention. I didn't just want revenge. I wanted Theodore to feel what I felt that night at my wedding. Humiliated, exposed, laughed at. And most importantly, I wanted him to know exactly who was responsible. This is getting long, and there's a lot more to tell. I'll post an update if anyone's interested in how I systematically dismantled my brother's entire life. Just remember, sometimes the person you've been stepping on for years is just waiting for the right moment to get back up. Update 1. Thanks for all the supportive comments. Reading through them actually helped me process some of this crap. And yeah, to the people asking if this is fake, I wish. Would have saved me years of therapy bills. Alright, where was I? After my wedding, I spent 2 years collecting info on Theodore. Not in some creepy stalker way, but just paying attention. The thing about narcissists like my brother is they can't help but tell on themselves if you listen long enough. It started with small things. Theodore would show up to Sunday dinner in designer clothes, but would forget his wallet when the check came. He'd post vacation pics on Instagram from luxury resorts, but I noticed he'd only stay for like 2 days instead of a full week. His wife Robin would brag about their new home renovation, then get weirdly defensive when my mom asked to see it. Just little shit that didn't add up. About 6 months after my wedding, my parents hosted a 4th of July barbecue. Theodore was late, which was unusual. He loves making an entrance but hates missing attention. When he finally showed up, I overheard him arguing with someone on the phone in the driveway. He didn't see me grabbing beers from the cooler around the corner. Theodore was practically begging whoever was on the other end about extending some deadline. Then he said something that made my ears perk up. "I'll have the money by the end of the month, I swear. The West Side project is about to pay off big." I filed that away. West Side project. First real clue. That fall, I ran into Blake at his bar. We got to talking, and I casually brought up Theodore's business. Blake's cousin apparently worked for the city permit office and mentioned there were issues with Theodore's latest development. Nothing public yet, but inspectors had flagged some concerns. Blake didn't think much of it. Construction delays happen all the time, but combined with the phone call I'd overheard, now I was interested. I started following local business news more closely, joined some neighborhood Facebook groups where Theodore's projects were being built. People were complaining about construction noise at odd hours, which isn't unusual, but also about weird shortcuts. One post showed pictures of what looked like substandard materials being delivered at night. Another complained about workers who seemed untrained. Small things, but they painted a picture. Meanwhile, Theodore's social media was all success. Success, success. Photos with local business leaders, charity golf tournament, his Porsche parked in front of his office building. The contrast between his public image and what I was learning was fascinating. Then came the dinner that changed everything. My parents' anniversary, about a year after my wedding. The whole family at this overpriced steakhouse my dad loves. I was already in a shit mood because my car was making a weird noise and the repair estimate was more than I wanted to spend. Then Theodore starts in about how I should level up from my little job and do something more ambitious. Not everyone gets handed opportunities by daddy's golf buddies, I said. The table went quiet. I never pushed back against Theodore, not like that. Theodore recovered quickly, laughing it off. Then he did something unexpected. He started complimenting me, said I'd always been good with my hands, said I had a good eye for detail, said I was trustworthy. It was so out of character I nearly choked on my steak. Then it clicked. He was buttering me up for something. Sure enough, as we were leaving, Theodore pulled me aside. He had this amazing investment opportunity he wanted to discuss. His latest development project was going to be huge, and he was looking for a few select investors. Family first, he said, like he was doing me a massive favor. I played it cool. Asked some basic questions. How much was he looking for? What kind of return? Timeline? Theodore was vague but enthusiastic. Said he'd send me some materials. I nodded and said I'd think about it. Eloise saw right through it on the drive home. She knows me too well. When I told her what I was thinking, she didn't try to talk me out of it. She just said to be careful, that Theodore had a lifetime of practice manipulating people, that revenge might feel good in the moment, but wouldn't heal old wounds. She was right about the wounds part. But I wasn't looking for healing. I was looking for justice. The next day, Theodore sent me a fancy investment packet, glossy photos, impressive projections, testimonials from past investors, but no actual financials, no concrete plans, no specifics, just hype, and Theodore's face plastered everywhere. I told him I'd need more details before considering it. He seemed annoyed but agreed to meet at his office the following week. Meanwhile, I did some digging, found the name River Mitchell mentioned in connection with Theodore's projects, some local investor who'd backed several of Theodore's developments. After some LinkedIn stalking and a well-timed message claiming I was considering investing with Theodore, River agreed to meet me for coffee. River was not what I expected. Casual clothes, no flashy watch, drove a sensible car. We were supposed to talk for 30 minutes. We ended up talking for 2 hours. I didn't even have to dig much. River was already concerned about Theodore's latest project. The numbers weren't adding up. Construction costs were rising, but Theodore kept insisting they could finish under budget. Permits were delayed, but Theodore promised that they were practically approved. Then River said something that made my blood run cold. Theodore had apparently used the same subcontractor for electrical work that had been cited in 3 other buildings for code violation. When River raised concerns, Theodore brushed them off, said it was just competitors trying to smear a good contractor. I asked if River had visited the construction site recently. The hesitation told me everything. River hadn't. Theodore kept making excuses about safety protocols and timing. I suggested we go together, unofficially. Just drive by, maybe peek through the fence. What we saw confirmed my suspicion. Materials sitting uncovered in the rain. Hardly any workers for a project supposedly on a tight deadline. And through a gap in the fence, I could see exposed wiring that even I knew wasn't up to code. The next day, I signed up for an online building inspection basics course, not because I planned to become an inspector, but because I needed to understand exactly what Theodore was cutting corners on. Spent the next month learning about building codes, safety requirements, and common violations. Eloise thought I was going overboard, but supported me anyway, even quizzed me sometimes while we did the dishes. During this time, Theodore got more aggressive about the investment, texts asking if I'd made a decision, calls about how the opportunity window was closing. His desperation was showing, and it was fucking delicious. I met with him at his office as promised. The place looked impressive at first glance: corner office, big windows, fancy furniture. But I noticed things. The family photo on his desk was years old. The award plaque on his wall was for a project that had fallen through. His secretary's desk had past due notices poorly hidden under a magazine. Theodore gave his sales pitch. I asked pointed questions about the electrical work, the permit delays, the materials. With each question, he got more defensive, kept saying I didn't understand the business, that I should trust him because he was family. When I pushed about the subcontractor's history of violation, he snapped. "Since when did you become such an expert? You've been jealous of me your entire life. Everyone knows it. Even Eloise probably knows she's settled." And there it was, the real Theodore. The wedding toast wasn't a one-off. This was who he'd always been. I smiled, just like I had at the wedding, said I'd think about the investment. As I was leaving, I noticed a name on a document on his secretary's desk, the same city inspector Blake's cousin had mentioned. I memorized it for later. Over the next few weeks, I built my case, documented everything, took photos of the construction site from public property, collected posts from concerned neighbors, found public records of the subcontractor's previous violation. It wasn't just corner cutting, it was dangerous. The final piece came when Theodore hosted a potential investors meeting at Blake's bar. I wasn't invited, but Blake texted me updates all night. Theodore got drunk and started panicking when some big investor didn't show. Told Blake he was leveraged to the hilt, that if this project didn't come through, he'd lose everything. That night, I laid it all out for Eloise, showed her everything I'd found, told her what I was planning. I expected her to tell me I was taking it too far. Instead, she reminded me of what Theodore had said at our wedding, how everyone had laughed, how her family had been confused and uncomfortable, how we'd left early from our own reception because I couldn't bear to look at my family anymore. He made his choice that night, she said. Now it's time for consequences. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls and sent 2 emails to the city inspector, to River, to the local business reporter who covered real estate. By noon, things were in motion. That evening, at exactly 7:37, my phone rang. Theodore. I let it go to voicemail. He called again and again, then started texting, panicked messages asking if I'd talked to River, if I knew why inspectors had shown up at his site, if I'd heard from our parents. I didn't respond, just took a screenshot and sent it to Eloise with the caption, "It begins." Because here's the thing about revenge. You can go small and get immediate satisfaction, or you can go big and change the whole fucking game. Theodore spent his life making me feel small. Now it was my turn to show him what it feels like to lose everything. Update 2. Thanks for the awards, but maybe donate to a mental health charity instead. This whole saga cost me enough in therapy bills, LOL. It's been exactly 2 years and 4 months since my wedding. The day after I sent those emails, I woke up to my phone buzzing non-stop, turned it to silent, and made coffee while Eloise was still sleeping. Our ancient coffee maker was leaking again, so I had to put a dish towel under it while brewing. Such a normal morning for what was about to be the least normal day of Theodore's life. When I finally checked my notifications, there were 17 missed calls, 8 from Theodore, 5 from my mom, 2 from my dad, 1 from Robin, Theodore's wife, and 1 from River. I listened to River's voicemail first, just wanted to let me know they'd pulled all funding from Theodore's projects and were considering legal action for misrepresentation. Thanked me for bringing the issues to light. I should have felt immediate satisfaction, the kind you see in movies where the hero finally gets revenge. Instead, I felt nothing, just calm, like watching storm clouds that had been building for years finally break. Around 10, my mom started texting. Family emergency. Need to meet ASAP. Theodore in trouble. I texted back that I had plans. She responded with 6 messages in a row about family obligations and how Theodore really needed support right now. I left her on read and took Eloise to brunch. While we were waiting for our food, my phone lit up with a news alert. Local business publication had dropped an article about safety violations at Theodore's development sites. Not just the current project, all of them. The reporter had done their homework, linking the violations to previous projects Theodore had rushed through inspection. There were quotes from former employees about pressure to cut corners, photos of substandard materials, even a statement from River about pulling investment. I showed Eloise the article. She read it silently, then looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not disapproval, but not celebration either. She asked if this was what I wanted. I told her it wasn't about what I wanted. It was about what Theodore deserved. The server brought our food, and we ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Eloise said something that stuck with me. She said Theodore had spent years building a house of cards, and all I'd done was open a window. He'd destroyed himself. I'd just made it visible. By the time we got home, my parents had escalated to crisis mode. Dad had left a voicemail saying they were coming over. Hadn't asked, just declared it. Classic. I considered not being home, but decided against it. This confrontation was part of the plan. They arrived around 2. Theodore was with them, looking like absolute shit. Unshaven, rumpled clothes, eyes bloodshot. Robin was noticeably absent. The moment they walked in, Theodore started. Accused me of sabotaging him, of being jealous, of trying to ruin his life. My mom backed him up, asking how I could do this to my own brother. My dad mostly stared at the floor, occasionally mumbling about family sticking together. I let them rant for about 5 minutes. Then I opened my laptop and turned it toward them. On screen was a folder labeled Theodore's House of Cards. Inside were hundreds of files, photos of safety violations, copies of complaints, records of the cut-rate contractors he'd hired, testimonials from neighbors about construction at odd hours. Everything I'd been collecting for 2 years. But that wasn't what shut them up. What shut them up was the audio file I played next. Theodore at Blake's bar, drunk, admitting to River and others that he knew about the safety issues but didn't care, that he just needed to finish the project before anyone noticed, that he was using substandard materials to save money, that if the buildings had problems down the road, he'd be long gone with the profits. My mom tried to claim it was taken out of context. I played more. Theodore laughing about how he'd conned the city inspectors. Theodore joking about how the residents wouldn't know what hit them when things started falling apart. Theodore bragging about how he'd used his charm to get extensions on his loan. By the 3rd recording, Theodore had stopped denying it. He just sat on my couch, head in his hands. My dad looked like someone had punched him. My mom kept trying to find excuses, but even she ran out of steam eventually. That's when I reminded them about my wedding, about Theodore's toast, about how everyone had laughed. I recited his exact words. Hard to believe Marcus finally tricked someone into saying yes. Asked if they remembered laughing. Asked if they remembered how Eloise and I had left early from our own reception. Asked if they had any idea how that felt. Theodore tried to say it was just a joke, that I was overreacting, that ruining his life over a stupid toast was insane. I told him this wasn't about the toast. The toast was just the final straw. This was about a lifetime of put-downs, of being treated like I was less than, of watching my parents favor him no matter what he did. And mostly, it was about the fact that he was putting people's lives at risk with his shortcuts and fraud. My mom started crying, saying I'd destroyed the family. I reminded her that she and Dad had made their choice years ago about who mattered in this family, that I was just finally making mine. They left after about an hour, Theodore looking defeated, my parents in shock. I expected to feel guilty, or at least conflicted. Instead, I just felt tired. Eloise made tea, and we watched a movie like it was any other Sunday. The fallout happened fast after that. Within a week, Theodore's business was under investigation by 3 different agencies. The projects were shut down. Investors were pulling out left and right. Former clients were filing lawsuits over potential safety issues in completed buildings. Robin left him 2 weeks later, took their dog too, posted on Instagram about starting fresh and removing toxic people from her life, changed her relationship status on Facebook before Theodore had even moved his stuff out of their house. Cold, but not surprising. She'd always been in it for the lifestyle. Theodore had to sell their house, the Porsche, Robin's fancy jewelry, moved into a small apartment across town, started driving for a rideshare company to make ends meet. My mom told me this like it would make me feel bad for him. It didn't. The real satisfaction came about a month after everything went down. My parents invited us to dinner, just family, they said, to talk things through. I almost declined, but Eloise thought we should go, face them one last time. When we arrived, Theodore wasn't there. Just my parents, looking older than I remembered. My mom had clearly been crying. My dad looked like he hadn't slept in days. They apologized, not just for the wedding, for everything, for always taking Theodore's side, for dismissing my accomplishments, for not seeing what Theodore was really doing with his business, for failing as parents. I'd like to say I forgave them, that we had some tearful reconciliation. We didn't. I told them apologies were nice, but they came about 25 years too late. That maybe someday we could have a relationship. But right now, I needed space. They didn't argue. As we were leaving, my dad asked if I was happy now, if ruining Theodore had given me what I wanted. I told him I didn't ruin Theodore. Theodore ruined Theodore. I just made sure he couldn't take innocent people down with him. In the months that followed, I expanded my own work, hired some people who'd lost their jobs when Theodore's projects shut down, even took over finishing one of the developments after the bank foreclosed, properly this time, with all safety codes followed, not out of spite, but because it was the right thing to do. Theodore tried to contact me a few times, texts about how I'd won, and could I please just talk to him, emails about how he was getting help for his issues, and wanted to make amends. I never responded. Some bridges stay burned. Last week was the 2-year anniversary of our wedding. Eloise and I renewed our vows in a private ceremony. Just us and a few close friends. No family. The only toast was from Blake, who kept it short and genuinely kind. Later that night, as we were getting ready for bed, Eloise told me she was pregnant. We'd been trying for about 6 months. The test was positive that morning, but she'd waited for the perfect moment to tell me. After all the darkness of the past few years, this felt like light breaking through. I haven't told my family yet. Not sure if I will. Some part of me thinks about what kind of grandparents they'd be. If they'd favor Theodore's kids, if he ever has any, the way they favored him. If they'd tell my child stories about how Uncle Theodore was always the smart one, the successful one, the special one. Yesterday I saw Theodore at the grocery store. He looked rough, older, defeated. He saw me too. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the produce section. Then he nodded slightly, turned his cart around, and left without buying any. I felt no satisfaction in that moment, no triumph, just certainty that I'd made the right choice, that some people never change, that sometimes the only closure you get is the kind you make for yourself. So that's it, the full story. Judge me if you want. Call it petty, call it extreme. But remember, I didn't create the situation. I just made sure there were consequences.